All right, so what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name's Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today is February 11th, 2024. I haven't been live for a while, haven't been uploading as much, been hella busy. Just got a few new gigs out here in Budapest. I've been working on writing the script for MF Doom, ranking his albums from worst to first for Culturalist Theory. So go check out the new episode I did on DJ Quick. That is going crazy, doing good numbers right now, good responses from the people. Thank you. Thank you to everybody who checked that out and left good comments under that video. I worked very hard on the DJ Quick video, and I'm working extremely hard on the MF Doom video. I'm very scared about people's reception to my perception of his music. But regardless, I'm back out here to chop it up with the people. Thank you also to everybody who's been checking out the movie reviews that I've been doing with my wife, Acti. We're not doing live with Acti right now because she's out there in Germany right now, spending time with her friends. And, she's not here with me. So I got the crib to myself, and I'm out here chopping it up with the people on live. I see we got 3-4 people in the chat. You know, these things are generally me just talking to myself, but I will be replying to every comment in the chat right now. This is live right now. I'm here with y'all right now. And I'm going to try to consistently go live, even if I am doing like 7 other things. You know, I'm a hardworking Black man. I got like 5 jobs if I really think about it. I'm an English teacher, a writer for many different companies, independent contractor, YouTuber, all sorts of stuff. But I still want to find time for this passion of mine, which is soaking in new information, getting new insights from reading the actual text, not just going off of the headlines, and building with the people and increasing my knowledge. And that's it. So let's get into this story today. Okay, so I found this article from the New York Times. We will be reading from the NYT, and it's about how 2 Irish businessmen almost took over Nigeria for $11 billion. Now, for anybody who's new to my content, because I did get a lot of subscribers over this past week when I didn't upload anything. If you're new here, I'll introduce myself. My name is Simon. I am not a Pan-Africanist. I am a globalist. I am a communist. I'm a socialist. I am as far left-wing as you can go. I sincerely hold my beliefs, and I am all about ending white supremacy. I am not a pro-Black person. I am about ending white supremacy. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. White supremacy is the devil. It is literally killing people on this planet. And this ideology needs to be defeated. Now, when we look at the continent of Africa, many of the countries in Africa, and I've been to Africa for anybody who's still new here and doesn't know me, many of the countries in Africa are colonial constructs. Their borders were just carved up by the European powers who came to Africa many centuries ago and said, okay, now you're Kenya, now you're Nigeria, now this is Namibia, etc., etc. In the fight against white supremacy, because Blackness is the antithesis to whiteness, and many of the world's Black people are concentrated in Africa, there has to be codification, unification in Africa. That does not make me a Pan-Africanist as I would define myself. But that does make me somebody who cares sincerely about Africa, because Africa is full of poor people who are divided up into countries that literally should not exist if we base them on ethnic lines, cultural lines, and that sort of stuff. And what we are seeing in Africa, the continued dysfunction that continues to take place in the continent, is a result of the European colonialism that happened well over 100 years ago and recently ended, because many of these countries gained their independence in the 1950s, 60s, some even late as the 90s. And the continued neocolonialism that happens from corporations who are able to extract Africa's resources like that and make billions of dollars off of them, while Africa remains one of the poorest places on the planet. So the fight against white supremacy cannot take place unless there is an Africa that is unified, codified, and that is standing up against white supremacy explicitly. It's very hard to do in this capitalistic world that we live in, to not fight against the forces of money. Those who come with the biggest bag usually get their way. And that's what we will see in this story. I did not read it ahead of time. I did not find out any information beforehand. I'm going to react to this article live with y'all and talk with y'all in the chat. If y'all want to leave comments, they will be read. All donations are accepted. Say whatever you want to say about me and I will reply. But you got to subscribe for at least 1 minute. So let's get into the story. how two Irish businessmen almost took over Nigeria for $11 billion. A mundane contractual provision met with rampant corruption, revealing a serious vulnerability in one of the backbones of international commerce. This article was written by Jesse Barron, published on February 9th, 2024. Like a lot of explosive financial scandals, the story of Michael Quinn and Brendan Cahill could fairly be described as a simple proposition that spun completely out of control. Now, I know I titled this Two White Guys Almost Bought Nigeria, right? And I don't know what's going to happen in the story. Whether they tried to intentionally go in there maliciously to do some backhanded deal with a corrupt African leader to basically control an African industry like oil and gas, or something else, or whether this was all an accident. An accident, so they say. But I want you to think about this. Would it even be possible in our world for us to have a headline? Two Nigerians almost buy Ireland. Two Cameroonians almost purchased the entire oil extraction industry in France. Two South Africans, two black South Africans, go to Italy and purchase all of the agricultural land. No, that could not happen in our timeline. Why? Because the wealth that was extracted from Africa continues to be in the hands and the possessions of the descendants of people who went and raped and pillaged Africa for its natural resources and still continue to this day. This is white supremacy in play. This is financial domination over our people in play. And we need to be aware of this. We need to be cognizant of this. When I went to Kenya, when I went to Tanzania, the number one people who have money there are, of course, the white folks who live there, and then the Chinese, the Arabs, the Indians, etc. These are the rich people of Africa. The richest Africans, if you look on Forbes right now, are mostly white. We are not, that is not a joke. Look on Forbes. Aliko Dangote and a few other black faces make up the numbers of billionaires and millionaires that are on the African continent. Let's go. So Mad Villainy jumped in. He did a fire emoji for the stream. And Nelson Moreno said, what's coming this week, Simon? What's coming this week? We got some movie reviews coming this week. I might do them solo because Acti is in Germany right now. I'm going to be doing some live streams, reading stories like this, and building with the people. Shout out to Mad Villainy. Shout out to Nelson Moreno. Leave comments. We're going to jump into the story about these two Irishmen who tried to purchase Nigeria. Think about how crazy that is. So, Quinn was an Irish oil and gas man with warm eyes and a mustache. Cahill was his longtime partner, an accountant by training. The two had been working in Nigeria since the 1970s, doing small-time deals in the energy and defense sectors like fixing tanks and siting oil wells. But in the mid-2000s, they spied a bigger opportunity. They knew that Nigeria's refineries were burning off most of the gas that was recovered during oil drilling, a practice that poisoned the atmosphere and deprived the country of a source of electricity. Quinn and Cahill proposed a gas leaning plant, which would take in the wet gas that would otherwise be flared and spit out lean gas that could actually power the grid. It would transform waste into fuel. All right, it sounds like they actually have a good idea. It sounds like these guys actually were like, two white guys from Ireland who are trying to come to Africa and actually do some business. The thing is, if you have not been to Africa, there are so many business opportunities in Africa, and that's not a lie. That's not a lie. I am not lying to you guys at all when I say this. There is no better opportunity for somebody who doesn't have anything and wants to turn a dollar into a dream, into a $1 billion, $1 million enterprise than in Africa. That is my honest opinion. I went to Africa with no real experience as an English teacher and came back and was able to make a career out of it. That's the honest truth. And when you see Africa now, like I said before, the Indians, the Chinese, the Arabs are all going to Africa right now, opening major businesses and making a ton of money. Living like gods on earth in Africa. There are so many opportunities there. The only reason I'm not living in Africa right now, like I've told y'all before, I'm in Budapest trying to get my education, going back to school, and I found some opportunities here. You know what I mean? But trust me, if I had the opportunity, I'd be back on road and trying to visit every African nation. Trust me. Anyway, Quinn and Cahill founded a new company for this purpose, the purpose of, transforming waste into gas, and gave it a forgettable name, Process and Industrial Development Limited. The two worked out an office in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, but P&ID's legal address was a P.O. box in Tortola in the British Virgin Islands. This could shield the new entity from taxes and scrutiny while also making it easier to raise capital on the international markets. The next step was to draw a proposal for the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the department that oversees Nigeria's considerable fossil fuel reserves. PNID would construct the $500 million facility. Nigeria would pipe in wet gas at no cost to the company. Then PNID would process it and pipe out the lean gas at no charge to the country. But in return, the company would return the valuable byproducts of the gas cleaning process like propane and butane, which it could sell at a profit. If Nigeria backed out at any point before the full 20-year term of the contract, it could be held liable for damages. Taken as a whole, it looked like an enormous commitment for Nigeria, one that might be met with skepticism when it finally met the eyes of the ministry's lawyers. So I'm going to be honest, if I was the president of Nigeria and these two white guys came to me with this deal, but their company was based in the British Virgin Islands and they weren't going to be paying Nigerian tax, I would not allow this company to operate in my country. This is the thing. All the African leaders who are allowing these big multinational giant corporations to come into Africa and extract the resources, make millions and billions of dollars, and they are not paying taxes to the nation, this is criminal. This is another rape of Africa. This is stealing the resources of the African people. You know, I don't define myself as African. I'm a person of African descent. I was this close to saying our resources, but I'm not a citizen of any African nation. But yet and still, I care about all black people. I care about ending white supremacy. And what this is here is an exploitative deal. Yet and still, they probably could have still made this deal because many African leaders would have said, how much can you give me? How much can you give me? The corruption in Africa is another big reason why I don't live there. From the streets to the president's house, corruption rules every single African nation. Facts. Going to continue here. Around this time, a lawyer named Grace Taiga landed a new job at the ministry as legal director. This was fortunate because Quinn and Cahill had known Taiga for years, ever since she was at the Ministry of Defense, and they were businessmen who occasionally won contracts from it. For about a year leading up to the submission of a PNID's proposal, Quinn and Cahill sent Taiga and one of her daughters just a bit more than $25,000 in incremental payments. Quinn also took Taiga's colleague, a ministry employee named Taufik Tijani, to dinner at Chopsticks, a Chinese restaurant in Abuja. The cost of that dinner was recorded in accounting books as $2,800. My God. My God, you can this I'm telling y'all, man, in Africa there's luxury. You could easily spend $2,800 at dinner in a fancy restaurant in Abuja. You know, one of the things I like about traveling is that you get to go places and, you know, eat well for cheap. You know what I mean? I've been in countries where with my wife and I spend $20 and we eat like kings. But $2,800 in Abuja, Nigeria, are you serious? Anyway, a Chinese dinner does not cost $2,800 in Abuja, the writer says. Okay. Then, shortly before the contract was signed, Cahill sent another $5,000 from a bank in Cyprus to Taiga's daughter account. To Taiga's daughter's account, which was coded as commission payment. Interesting. So there's some corruption happening here, and I want us to look at the names here. Now, Grace Taiga, possibly Nigerian, black Nigerian name. I don't know about the other guy. Who was it? Taufik Tijani? Sounds foreign to me. Now, I'm not being, you know, xenophobic or jingoist saying this, but once again, we have to point out, why are so many foreigners able to make so much money working and living in the African continent? Meanwhile, the average black African lives in squalor. Why? All right. Taiga sent the contract to her boss, Rilwanu Lukman, the Minister of Petroleum Resources. It wasn't much. 20 pages of mostly boilerplate language drawn up on the ministry's green bordered stationery. It was more like an outline than a fully developed proposal for a multi-million dollar gas deal. But Taiga assured Lukman in a memo that it would be a leap forward for Nigeria. On January 11th, 2010, Lukman, Quinn, and Taiga signed their names. The deal was done. See, I told you. I told you. I told you. White man comes waving a bunch of money around, takes a black person to a fancy Chinese restaurant, spends a few bands, and you're able to buy Nigeria. You're able This is white supremacy. This is white supremacy in play. People tell me there's no anti-blackness in the world. There's no racism in the world, that white folks don't still run the world. What are we seeing here? Few white guys came with a few dollars and was able to make this deal happen. Crazy. All right. Days later, a man named Neil Hitchcock, PNID's only full time employee, wrote to Cahill saying he needed $1.5 million to begin clearing the ground for the facility. But PNID did not have $1.5 million. The plan had been to raise capital for the project on the basis of the signed 20-year contract, then bring on engineers and laborers. This was how they'd always operated in Nigeria. That's crazy. That's crazy. Nelson Moreno said, "We need AI to save Africa." I believe AI could be used to save all of humanity. We could automate a lot of jobs if we make sure that every state pays their citizens a universal basic income while the wealth is created by the robots. If individuals could hire AI robots to do their job and collect the pay from those robots, a lot more productivity could happen. That would be great. Imagine if I could have a robot Simon writing the MF Doom list, a robot Simon teaching an English class, and a robot Simon on YouTube. I could basically be a millionaire, right? Through a year's work. I'm working one job and I have three people doing that. That would be great. But we don't live in that future yet. And we have to fight to create that future because unfortunately, right, the capitalist class is going to rather than use AI to create better conditions for its workers, they'd rather shed workers, not even pay people, and just have robots do the job. That's why you go into McDonald's now. They used to have three or four cash register girls. Now, what do we have? Three or four machines where you boop, boop, boop. I want a Big Mac, right? Anyway, talking here about this thing. This is so crazy. These guys were doing business in Nigeria with no capital. They were just doing it on handshakes. We don't have the money, but we can get the deal done. They were probably getting a lot of their funding from banks, just showing their passports, showing their fancy titles, and they were able to, get the funding for their projects. All right, let's continue here. In June, Quinn opened his morning paper to an unwelcome twist. The oil drilling company that Nigeria had promised would supply the wet gas had decided to keep it. The gas turned out to be useful for maintaining pressure inside the wells. Quinn might have picked up the phone and protested to his friends inside the government, but most of them were gone. A new president had recently come into office. Luke Mann had been replaced. In February 2011, Hitchcock sent a text message that suggested the company was in dire straits. In view of the rapidly deteriorating situation here, I see no option but to liquidate some PNID assets, he wrote. With your approval, I propose to sell the Honda Civic. Okay, this is hilarious. These are two broke boys. They're two broke boys, but because they're white in Africa, they're able to make major $1 million, $1 billion deals with the Nigerian government. Ain't that crazy? Ain't that crazy? Tell me where me as a black man, I could go in Europe and just start shaking hands with government officials, closing $1 million deals off of the benefits of my whiteness and my supposed expertise. It's insane. All right. Quinn emailed the new president, good luck, Jonathan, but his appeal went nowhere. Wow. Surprisingly, he couldn't get an email. I'm actually surprised that they didn't reply to his email, right? Anyway, to a well seasoned observer, all of this would have seemed like a pretty average case of what investors call political risk. When doing business in a corrupt country, it's not at all uncommon that a new group takes power, then reneges on its predecessor's deals. It happened all the time in Nigeria, which Transparency International ranks as one of the world's most corrupt places, on par with Afghanistan and Guatemala. The whole affair seemed destined to melt without a trace. But the contract had been drawn with a trapdoor at Article 20, a clause that transported you across the world. In the event of a dispute between the parties, nobody would go to court. They would settle their differences in a process called international arbitration, which had different rules than a trial and was closed to the press. The venue of the arbitration shall be London, the contract specified. Quinn and Cahill hadn't laid a single pipe for the gas leaning facility, but this fact was immaterial. When the arbitration finished, the government of Nigeria had been thoroughly defeated. The decision was in PNID's favor. The damages were $6.6 billion. Okay, let's really break down this story. This is crazy. So these two guys, Quinn and Cahill, had no money. They were trying to create some sort of gas extraction company. They base their company in the British Virgin Islands and want to do business in Nigeria so they don't have to pay Nigerian tax. They're able to butter the palms of a few Nigerian officials in the Minister of Finance, two who sound foreign, Lukman and Taiga, whatever, maybe, and they were able to get the contract, even though they literally had no money to start up the process. On top of that, they couldn't actually get the gas, even if they did have a solid business plan, because the Nigerian company they were going to get the gas from didn't actually want to give them the gas because it's necessary for their operation. So they're up shit's creek. They got no money. The only asset the company has is a Honda Civic, and they have to sell it. But in the contract, they were able to get the devil in the details. And in Article 20 of the contract, what does it say? What does it say? If this deal falls through, we have to take this to court, not Nigerian court, British court. We got to do it in London, in our home team, right? That's crazy. That's literally crazy. What is this? This is white supremacy in play. And this is why we have to read between the lines. We have to look at the details. We have to look at these contracts. And this is why neocolonialism still happens in Africa. Too much corruption in Africa from African leaders or people representing these African nations, not thinking about their best interests. They just want $2,800 Chinese dinners in Abuja. They don't actually want to make a better African nation. The corrupt African leaders. And on top of that, sick, sadistic, white supremacists, modern white supremacists today who are practicing neocolonialism in Africa. This is insane. This is literally insane. How do you get $6.6 billion in a judgment and you didn't do anything? You didn't do anything. I'm telling y'all guys, if you want to make money, go to Africa, make some deals, and you can get money poof out of thin air. Let's go. International arbitration is one of those elaborate little wheels in the global financial system that spin constantly in the background without anybody hearing the sound. Every day in financial capitals like Geneva, London, and Paris, arbitration panels hand down decisions in every conceivable kind of contest, from institutions with nothing to see here names: the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, the International Chamber of Commerce. Parties come here precisely because they have agreed to steer clear of the courts. And if all goes well, they don't interact with the local judicial system at all. Billions of dollars can change hands inside these rooms without a flicker of news coverage ever appearing. The system was designed as an efficient intercontinental fast lane beside the traffic jam of traditional justice. In the decades after the Second World War, when countries were eager to bind themselves together as trading partners, they worried about what might happen if disputes across borders arose. Pardon. Where was the United Nations of Business to remedy the problem? A group of 24 nations signed a landmark arbitration treaty in 1958. Other treaties followed until arbitration became a part of doing business in nearly every country in the world. As the sociologist Pierre Bourdieu put it, arbitration was a part of the global logic of the New World legal order, an order, it was hoped, in which enemies would turn into business partners. But we have to understand that these treaties, these international orders, these modern ways of doing business are built in the favor of the people who write them. And who are the people that write them? Unfortunately, the white supremacists, the Europeans, the former colonialists or the descendants of those colonialists continue to dominate our society and continue to hold sway. This is why it's important for us to be educated, for us to be in those rooms, for us to write those laws and be at the table when those decisions are made. Gonna jump into the comments here. JS Venture says, could you do a video about Trump's newest premise? He will create a private red state army that will gather all the illegals and send them to camps by the border. SS type beat. Oh my God. Yeah. Trump is another level. I really hope he's defeated in November. I have a strong inkling to think that he will be defeated. He has all of those legal cases happening. People remember what happened during COVID. His rhetoric is becoming more crazy. I am not one of those people who thinks, oh, Trump is going to walk away with this because, right now, what's happening, I think, a lot of the things are piling up based on what he's done. He's not going to beat all of those cases, no matter what they try to do to Fani Willis or any of the other prosecutors who are pursuing him. And on top of that, he has a lot of money trouble. He has a lot of money trouble. He just got hit with that $83 million judgment from the E. Jean Carroll case. I really don't see Trump winning again. And rhetoric like that, like what you told me, J.S. Ventress, in my opinion, is really why he won't win, because the American people generally are like sick and tired of like the pseudo fascist tough guy look. I'm not buying the talk from people that black men are abandoning the Democratic Party or that black men are considering voting for Trump. I'm not with it at all. I don't think that's actually happening. And please remember, guys, I am not a Democrat. I am your worst nightmare. politically. All right. Most of these arbitration cases wouldn't generate headlines even if the doors were flung open. Many are just a couple of businesses fighting over money. Then there's a subset of cases in which a business or a single investor can bring a claim against a sovereign state. Many of these manage to be equally unremarkable. In 2012, a Swedish nuclear power company took Germany to arbitration for phasing out its nuclear program ahead of schedule. The German government was spooked by the Fukushima disaster and received more than 1 billion euros in the settlement. Lawyers who practice in the area see it as a way to keep global commerce flowing smoothly. If you didn't have this system, you'd have what there used to be, which was gunboat diplomacy. Gary Bourne, an international arbitration lawyer based in London, told me a foreign ministry or somebody's military would take up cudgels on behalf of the local investor against the host state. A country that doesn't pay its arbitration bills can wind up blackballed by foreign investors. Rather than hopelessly resist, Bourne told me, the overwhelming majority of parties voluntarily comply. So basically, what they're saying here, not to bore y'all with this, because this is not a financial channel. I don't talk about big, high level finance unless it relates to stories like this. What they're saying here is like international arbitration is the way that these companies from different places that are doing business with each other settle their disputes. And a lot of the times, it's just companies fighting over the cash payments that they say that they're owed or that they don't want to pay. That's all they're saying here. All right. Bourne estimates that 1,600 arbitration cases are filed every year in which one party is an investor and the other party is a state or state owned enterprise. But the opacity of the system makes exact figures impossible to get. In some arbitrations, we know the parties, but the specific details of the proceedings remain private. In a majority, however, the existence of the arbitration itself is never disclosed. Some investors see discretion as a selling point. You don't want to find yourself in the Financial Times whenever you have to pay a lawyer. But when it comes to disputes between investors and sovereign states in which public money and the public welfare are at stake, the secrecy has drawn criticism as a potentially serious flaw. If it was in court, it would be public. Stephen Schill, a professor of international law at the University of Amsterdam, says of the PNID affair, the press would monitor it and would immediately pick out problems. The confidentiality is a big problem. It makes it easier to hide corruption. See, this is the big thing, man. I really think that these international arbitration cases should be public. We should know what these major corporations are handling behind closed doors. There's no reason for anything like this to be private, especially if we're talking about major companies who are dealing with the lives of many workers. If I work for a major company like Google or Apple and they go to court in international arbitration and they get hit with a $60 billion judgment, I should know as an employee if I need to look for another job. This should not be something that's held behind closed doors. And it's not something, especially if they're dealing with political leaders, that should be held behind closed doors, because we need to know if there is corruption happening with our political leaders. So, in the summer of 2015, representatives for both sides took their seats in a conference room in a building called the International Dispute Resolution Center on Fleet Street. Lord Leonard Hoffman, an affable South African, presided over a three-member panel. Many arbitrators are elderly retired judges like Hoffman. The proceedings occasionally had the vibe of a closed and arcane European club, as one historian put it. The purpose of the hearing was to calculate damages. Okay, if I was Nigeria, I send my black lawyers up there to the old European club, closed and arcane European club. I wonder if I'm going to get fair treatment, fair judgment in this case. I don't know. I mean, we did see South Africa take Israel to the International Criminal Court, or ICJ, International Court of Justice, and they did get a victory. But still, if this is all private, they're able to exact, justice the way they see fit to their benefit. They don't want to set a legal precedent that would make it harder for other international companies to take advantage of African affairs and African resources. Going to continue here. Quinn had prepared a 34-page witness statement to establish his bona fides and show that PNID could have delivered on its end of the deal, were it not for Nigeria's reneging. He sketched out his track record. One day in 1970s Dublin, when Quinn and Cahill were still managing bands, they were approached by a Geneva-based exporter who worked in West Africa and evidently recognized that the backroom skills of a band manager could be more profitably applied to the import-export trade. Soon they were exporting machine components and beer to West Africa on their own. From there, Quinn had expanded to projects that included restoring an aging fleet of Scorpion tanks, supplying the Nigerian government with rescue boats, and training on how to operate them, fixing an offshore crude loading platform in the Niger River Delta. The testimony gave the impression of what one Niger Delta oilman I spoke to called soak time, the long years in country that gave you a feel for how things worked. See, this is crazy. Once again, you can go to Africa with nothing. This guy, Quinn and Cahill, were band managers in Dublin, Ireland. These guys were working in the music biz and ended up multi-million-dollar exporter, importer, traders to Africa. Life can take you all sorts of crazy ways. I never expected I'd be living in Budapest, Hungary. Never expected I'd be an English teacher. And these guys probably never expected that them wanting to be the next manager of the next Beatles would make them have a $6.6 billion deal with Africa in arbitration. Going to continue here. But the colorful biography omitted a salient detail: the thousands of dollars that Quinn and Cahill had paid to Taiga and others. The payments were a well kept secret. Taiga wasn't about to confess to having committed a crime, so Nigeria's lawyers didn't learn about them, and the three-member panel of arbitrators stayed in the dark. Hoffman found against Nigeria. This is tragic. This is tragic. So these guys did corruption. Now, their argument might be, well, that's just the law of the land. That's the feel of Nigeria. The only way to get business done in Nigeria is to be corrupt. That might be their argument, but that still doesn't make it right. And that would not hold up in any legal court. That would not hold up in civil court, criminal court, court in the streets, nothing like that. Ain't no way you can give the corruption defense. We gotta pay Peter to pay Paul to get business done in Nigeria. So this is insane that they ruled against Nigeria in this $6.6 billion judgment, even though the guys who got the deal done did it corruptly. All right. And this is where the structure of the deal revealed its true asymmetry. The original contract said that Nigeria had to give PNID wet gas not for a year or two, but for 20 years. Nigeria had failed to do this. Even though PNID hadn't yet spent a penny on construction, Nigerian law, like British law, held that the party who breached the contract had to make the other party whole by paying them the amount they would have made had the contract been fulfilled. What this meant: when Nigeria paused on the wet gas, a legal wire was tripped. Nigeria owed PNID for 2 decades of hypothetical future profits from the sale of gas byproducts that they had never processed in a facility they had never built. But how much was that? See, that's insane. Once again, this is crazy. This is crazy. The Nigerians wanted to keep their gas because they needed it to work their own pipes so they could, help their own people. These two guys did not have the facility set up. They set up their business corruptly abroad, foreignly, and yet and still they are going to be able to collect $6.6 billion from Nigeria, a country where most of the people live in abject poverty. Absolutely insane. How do you go to bed at night knowing that you're taking Nigeria to court for this amount of money, knowing how the people live in Nigeria, showing that these people have no care, no remorse, no concern at all about black life? Gonna jump into the comments here. JS Ventress said, do you think we will see Nigeria turn into something like China or Japan in our lifetime? Not with deals like this happening, not with this rampant level of corruption happening, not with this stacked deck against them where they get ruled against in the International Arbitration Court because the people that did business with them are corrupt. No, I'm not going to see a Nigerian China. If we're talking about Nigeria pushing, exporting, utilizing the cheap labor that they have to allow international corporations to come in here and exploit that and pay the people $2 a day instead of one so that we can have even cheaper iPhones and that sort of stuff. Sure, Nigeria can be the next China, but that's not what we want. We don't want an Africa exploited of its resources and its people paid pennies on the dollar. We want to see a wealthy, prosperous Africa where everybody has the ability to live their full and happy lives. And on top of that, not live in dystopian hell like China. or Japan either. Going to continue here. PNID had commissioned a report by a consulting firm, Berkeley Research Group, which laid out estimates of revenue and cash flow if the project had come to fruition. Financiers use something called a discount rate to calculate the value of future profits, taking into account all the risks that might be involved. The greater the risk of an investment, the higher the discount rate, and the lower the present day value. Investments in Nigeria were considered risky because of political instability and corruption. So the standard discount rate at the time was more than 10%. The Berkeley report used 2.6%. On another page of the report, Berkeley predicted that oil, whose price historically correlates with that of natural gas byproducts, would rise steadily year after year to $115 a barrel in 2024. But commodity prices fluctuate for all sorts of reasons, and today oil trades for $75 a barrel. One lawyer I interviewed, who has handled many investor state arbitrations, called these calculations simply primitive. Berkeley Research Group declined to comment. Nigeria's lawyers tried weakly to whittle it all down because Quinn and Cahill had done nothing yet expected an income for 20 years, but it didn't persuade Hoffman. Was the contract violated? It was. If so, how much was owed? Hoffman came to a figure $6.6 billion with interest at 7%, or about $1 million a day. They were going to pay two Irish former band managers $6.6 billion or $1 million a day for 20 years. 20 years, and they didn't do anything. They didn't open a plant. They didn't take a shovel and try to dig the oil out themselves. They didn't do anything. These people are thieves. These people are evil. You have to literally be evil. I respect the jokes. You get what I'm saying? I respect anybody. I respect anybody who can, take money from stupid people and put it in their pocket. But there has to be a limit, right? If you're able to, do phone scams and you're able to get, I don't know, $20 out of a dumbass, that's one thing. But taking that whole man's life savings, you got to be evil. So C Doggo says, is this the Shell thing? Shout out to C Doggo. I haven't seen him in a while. I don't know. But C Doggo, I learned some Hungarian, so I want to tell you, Sia Hozvaj, Yo Esakat, and I forgot the rest. Ovendek. That's all I'll say. That's the most Hungarian I know right now. I've been studying C Doggo, but shout out to C Doggo jumping in the chat. We're talking about these we're talking about these two Irish guys who came to Nigeria and got a judgment for $6.6 billion against the country. All right. C Doggo says, keep learning. I will. Thank you. But please, everybody, please don't call me bro. I'm not your bro. My name's Simon. Just call me Simon. Please, please. All right. Anyway, when I spoke to Hoffman last spring, I found him affable and quick, with a wry sparkle. He noted that Nigeria's lawyers had never asked for any discovery from PNID. They never disputed the fact that Quinn and Cahill were qualified to build the gas plant, even though they had never built one before. And of course, they never raised the bribery. They made no attempt to bring it to our attention. He marveled in the plummy South African drawl. This was true, but they couldn't have brought it to his attention because it hadn't been uncovered. Not yet. In the middle of discussing the fatal weakness of the defense, the corners of Hoffman's mouth curled up as though welcoming some private realization. Why are you smiling? I asked. Because I see it as a very strange sort of case, he said. Jumping back into the comments, C Doggo said, I heard about Shell, the oil company, made a civil war in Nigeria once. Yeah, I heard about that too. Shell was very exploitative in Nigeria because Nigeria has some of the largest oil and natural gas resources in the world. I believe Nigeria is a part of OPEC. Which is basically a cartel on oil and natural gas in the world. And so, yeah, Nigeria definitely got exploited by Shell. But this is, once again, a different story, which I believe is even more egregious because it's two people getting a ton of money for doing nothing and taking it from one of the poorest nations on earth, which has to be a way to get a first class ticket to hell. All right, jump in here. So by the time Hoffman's decision came down in January 2017, Nigeria once again had a new president, Muhammadu Buhari, who in the 1980s was the country's military dictator. That spring, Buhari and his cabinet tried to settle with PNID, but negotiations broke down. In September, PNID gave notice that it intended to enforce the award to begin the process of extracting payment. Buhari had his back against the wall. He would have to surrender a sum of taxpayer dollars that equaled 5 times the budget for education and 10 times the budget for public health. But there was a second option. As early as 2016, lawyers for Nigeria were urging government officials to dig into the mysterious company's background, noting that the offshore structure of PNID, its apparently small size, and lack of significant track record were crying out to be investigated. Britain's rules of arbitration said that if an award had been obtained by fraud and caused substantial injustice to the losing party, that a party could ask a civil court to overturn what the arbitration panel had done in private. In the history of arbitration, the courts had seldom seen it fit to overturn what a panel had decided. So this is actually a good thing for their story, right? So the new president of Nigeria comes in, right? And he sees that he has a bill. The new president, Muhammadu Buhari, says, God damn, I got to pay these two Irish boys $6.6 billion. That's 10 times the amount they spend on education and healthcare and, other social services and stuff. So his lawyers are looking into, how to fight this. And it says in British law, because the contract that they signed with these two Irish guys says that the court has to be in London. They go there and the court says if something was committed by fraud, that we can overturn what the arbitration court did. So that's actually a good thing. There is some recourse. You know what I'm saying? Like anytime black people have gotten justice in this world, it's been mostly through the legal system, through legal mechanisms. Very rarely has it been done through violence or other, forceful means. So this is actually a good thing. And I hope there's a good end to the story. I don't know what's going to happen yet, but I hopefully there's a good end to the story. I would hate to find out that Nigeria ended up paying these boys $6.6 billion. That would be horrible. All right. Buhari assigned the investigation to his attorney general, Abubakar Malami, who cut a flamboyant figure. Having come into office with promises to clean up corruption, Malami had quickly become a target of corruption allegations himself. The muckraking website Sahara Reporters would accuse him of abusing his office for profit, buying foreign cars and luxury properties for himself and his sons. There was a general sense in Nigeria that Malami was irredeemably corrupt and used the corruption to feather his own nest. Farouk Kapirogi, a Nigerian American professor and political columnist, told me Malami did not respond to multiple requests for comment. In a memoir published last year, he worries wear Rolexes while your people live in huts, in squalor, eating bush meat and stuff like that. You should be ashamed of yourself, and you are just as bad as the white supremacists. Facts. I hate corrupt African leaders, government officials, just as much as I hate the white supremacists. These people are robbing the African people of their wealth and opportunities and prosperity. Water break. All right, let's go. These allegations tarnished Malami's public image, but the PNID award was quickly becoming the defining issue of his tenure. As headlines chastised the government for the astronomical loss, perhaps he felt that it was an opportunity for him to be seen to be doing something, Kapirogi says. Or maybe he thought, why should so much money leave the country if I'm not getting a piece of it? Insane. Once again, Farouk Kapirogi, once again, the Africans who run the show are not really the Africans that we imagine. Malami tapped the agency inside the Nigerian state tasked with investigating corruption, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, a thinly staffed unit with a mixed reputation. The EFCC was established in 2003, initially to combat money laundering. Officers have a thankless, dangerous job. On more than one occasion, they have been targeted by assassins. In 2010, a top investigator was shot and killed in his own home. God damn. All right, gonna jump into the comments here. C Doggo left a comment. As I see the world money in not made, it just swap owner. I don't know exactly what you're saying here, C Doggo. As I see the world money in not made. I just swapped owner. See, that's the communist thinking, man. See, doggo, I don't know how old you are. Don't know how old you are, but one of the interesting things about Hungary, it used to be a communist nation. And I think a lot of people in Hungary still like communism, by the way, I think. But yeah, money is not created or destroyed. It's like matter, right? They only make more money. They only print more money, but the wealth that's out there usually is not destroyed or lost. It just switches owners' hands, right? Let's go here. Interviewing the employees at the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, the EFCC concluded that the approval of the contract had significantly hinged on the recommendation of Grace Taiga. Bank records showed deposits that lined up perfectly with major events in the timeline of the contract. In September 2019, investigators arrested Taiga, interrogated her for 3 weeks, then sent her to prison pending trial. She claimed that the suspicious cash deposits were from the sale of a car or maybe property she had sold from her late mother's estate. She was charged with corruption. All right, as she should. As she should. This woman, I don't know if it was a black woman. They have her here in the silhouette looking like a black woman, but whoever it was, yeah, if you took, a fancy Chinese dinner to sell out your country, you deserve to go to jail. All right. A kind of frenzy seemed to take hold of investigators on their paradoxical mission to help the Nigerian state by proving how corrupt its bureaucrats really were. The agents were accused of coloring outside the lines of the law. There was an Irishman named James Nolan who met Quinn in Dublin in the 1990s and worked as a part-time manager for PNID. The EFCC arrested him in Abuja. I was asked to sign a document stating that the PNID project was an orchestrated scam intended to defraud the Nigerian government. He later wrote in a statement. He declined, so they detained him for 13 months in Kuje prison, which was overcrowded and had no running water and frequent blackouts. Nothing is more scary to me than going to a Nigerian jail. I don't know about jails in other countries, but I would assume Nigerian jail got to be top 10 worst things that can happen to you. Top 10 worst things that could happen to you. With number one might be, I don't know, smelling Monique's panties. Number two might be having to listen to like Cat Williams rant on about his childhood. And number three might be going to Nigerian jail. Going to Nigerian jail is probably hella scary. All right. C Doggo said, what do you think about the Wagner Group and China missions in Africa? Will it make any change in those countries in the future? So I truly believe that the Wagner Group, the Russian mercenary group, is a force of destruction in Africa. My opinion is that the Russian mercenaries who are going there in Africa are hardcore white supremacist Nazis. And this is not a something that I'm pulling out of my ass or pulling out of thin air. Wagner Group was started by a man who has the SS tattooed on his shoulders. They named it after the composer who was the Nazi composer, Richard Wagner, I believe. Yeah, many of the people there, there have been reports of Wagner soldiers saying that they can't wait to go to Africa just to kill black people, right? Many of the Wagner soldiers are, while they are hired by the African governments like Mali, Niger, Guinea, and that sort of stuff to fight Islamic insurgents and that sort of stuff. Really, a lot of those guys are going there with the motivation to slaughter as many black people as they can. I forgot what country it was, Mali or Niger, but there was a contingent of Russian soldiers, or I mean Russian mercenaries, a part of Wagner, who went there and slaughtered innocent people in some village that was supposedly under Islamist or terrorist control. So I don't think Wagner is actually a force for good in Africa. Russia has a vested interest to fight, American, influenced nations in other parts of the world. So they were happy. Russia was very happy to see last year when Niger had a coup, Mali had a coup, all these other African nations like Burkina Faso had coups. They were very happy to see this because this allows Wagner to come in there and get military contracts, mercenary contracts. So that's money going to Russia. And on top of that, Wagner is going to Africa specifically to extract the gold. I believe, what was his name? Prigozhin. When Prigozhin died, they raided his house in Moscow and found a bunch of gold in his apartment, like bars of gold. That comes from Africa. Newsflash, guys, most of the gold in the world comes from Africa, if you don't know. So the Russians are getting rich off of African misery. Nobody in the world actually cares about Africa. We're not going to expect the Russians to care about Africa, the Europeans in general to care about Africa, America and Latin America or Asia to care about Africa. Africa has to care about themselves. Black people have to love ourselves. We have to care about what happens on the continent and call out instances of white supremacy like this, these exploitative trade deals that are done that allow two Irish guys who are band managers to get $6.6 billion out of Nigeria for doing fuck all. All right, I'm going to jump into the comments. Nelson Moreno said sick. I don't know what he said sick to. Maybe it was smelling Monique's panties. I don't know. Craig Mack said, got to watch the Super Bowl. If you got to watch the Super Bowl, guys, you ain't got to hang out with me here. But let me know who won. Let me know who won. You know, I don't really watch sports like that. I am interested to see Usher's halftime show. I think Usher's going to put on a sick show. I just don't want to hear any of those late 2010 pop hits. But we need Climax. I just want to hear Climax. I want him to hit that high note on Climax in front of all of America. Anyway, going to continue here. So this guy, this investigator, this Irish investigator was sent to a Nigerian jail for 13 months. Nolan's bipolar disorder flared and his teeth rotted. The EFCC did not respond to multiple requests for a comment. Eventually, the government released him, charged him with money laundering, and confiscated his passport. Nolan did not appear at trial, and his current location is unknown. That's scary. That's scary. He's probably in a ditch somewhere. The government hired a team of white shoe lawyers to pick up where the EFCC left off. The lawyers filed motions in U.S. courts to seize additional bank records. A trail of suspicious transactions beckoned them. Between 2008, when PNID started preparing the gas leaning plan, and 2010, when the contract was signed, more than $10 million in cash had been withdrawn from its accounts. The day before Quinn met Rilwanu Lukman, the Minister of Petroleum Resources, $84,000 was withdrawn. There were two withdrawals of $5,000 each the day before a crucial meeting with Lukman a few months later. Lukman died in 2014, before the EFCC investigation began. Taufik Tijani, the ministry employee, told investigators that after the dinner at Chopsticks restaurant, a PNID employee threw a black bag containing $50,000 into the trunk of his car. Tijani testified against PNID and received a non-prosecution agreement. He died in 2021. This is absolutely insane, how the level of money, the big money that they were spending on this deal. Imagine, spending maybe $100,000 corrupting a few African leaders, and your return on investment for spending maybe 100K is that you get a $6.6 billion deal from the Nigerian government. And you didn't have to do anything. You just paid a few people. That's how much money that there is in the world, showing you how unfair our world is. And on top of that, the level of corruption that continues to bankrupt Africa and why white supremacy continues to dominate Africa through neocolonialism. Nelson Moreno jumped in. If they did this to Israel, both Irish guys would be dead. Africa is like a drunk woman walking alone at night in the eyes of the world. Absolutely, Nelson Moreno. That is a very, very good comparison. I really like that comparison. Yeah, number one. Like I said at the beginning of the stream, this story is not possible in any other nation. You could not hear about two black guys tried to buy Israel. Two black guys went to Israel and got a $6.6 billion shekel deal out of the Israelis after doing nothing. You could never hear this happen in any other nation. And if it did happen, those guys would be hauled off to jail in those nations. But we live in a world that is inherently unfair to the people that create the most resources and most wealth for the rest of the world, the African people. And this needs to stop. All right, continuing here. To pretend that all of this was out of the ordinary would, of course, be totally naive. It's really difficult to do business in Nigeria without being solicited to pay a bribe. Stephen Powell, a forensic lawyer who frequently works there, told me. Diran Fawibe, a former staff member at the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, told me that Quinn and Cahill probably knew that Nigeria is a corrupt country and that they could easily get people to bend the rules. But Nigeria asserted that Quinn took the rule bending to the furthest possible fringes. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Nigeria went to court and said, we accept corruption. Corruption is a part of the game. But too much corruption is too much. Too much corruption is not good. We do not like this much level of corruption. We like bitty corruption, bitty, a little for you, a little for me, but not all the pie. You do not take all the pie. This is not good. This is what Nigeria said in court. All right. They weren't paying bribes to lubricate an otherwise solid project. They seemed to be paying bribes because they barely had a project at all. This is crazy. I've never heard of something like this. If anybody really wants to get ahead, man, this is the scam. This is the scam. Forget trying to trick old white ladies out of their money through, I don't know, love bombing scams on Tinder. Go to Africa, shake a few hands, grease a few palms of some, business people, and you can get mad money. This is the deal. These guys just went overboard with it. All right. An early drawing of the wet gas unit was a ripped out piece of lined paper with hand drawn pipelines on it, squiggles of blue marker representing water. A later drawing, the one they showed the ministry, was a screenshot they took from designs for a different facility. By the end, the 34 bundles of evidence told a story that one lawyer for Nigeria categorized as industrial scale fraud. The former band managers, they argued, had shaken down a sovereign state for $6.6 billion for failing to fulfill an illegally procured contract that relied on copied plans for a different project. If there ever had been a case that cried out for a substantial injustice challenge, this one seemed to be it. In 2020, Nigeria made its case to a judge in the High Court of Justice. The judge, Sir Ross Cranston, confronted what he called an unprecedented situation. As PNID's lawyers noted, he couldn't go messing with an arbitration award just because a few bribes had been uncovered many years after the fact. The whole essence of arbitration was finality. At the same time, the judge wrote, if he prevented Nigeria from going to trial, the British legal system might make itself an unwitting vehicle to an intercontinental fraud. He decided to let the case go forward. PNID would become a rarity among the 1,600 cases filed every year, a private arbitration that erupted into public view. So let's take note of that. Let's take note of that. The judge did not say that Nigeria was done an injustice. Therefore, let's rectify this injustice. No, they didn't say that something wrong happened. Let's fix it. They said, if we allow this to happen, our legal system might be in trouble. The British legal system might be under more scrutiny. People might no longer believe in international arbitration, European dominated legal systems, because we might unwittingly allow these two Irish guys to get away with fraud. Showing once again, nobody cares about the African people. People only do things out of their own self interest when it concerns us. If there was justice for Nigeria in this deal, and I don't know yet because we didn't finish the story, it's not because they saw in the kindness of their own hearts that they need to change their ways and rectify this wrong. It's actually because they said, oh, this will make our legal system complicit in fraud. So let's fix it. All right, let's continue with the story. And I believe we're almost done here. So, as expensive as arbitration may be, litigation is usually worse. In 2019, an arbitration panel ruled that Pakistan owed $6 billion to an Australian mining company, Tethyan, after Pakistan violated Tethyan's contract to exploit a few mining plays in the country's southwest. When Pakistan dragged its feet on payment, Tethyan took it to court. The company's legal fees ran to $59.4 million. All right, C Doggo says, think about it. Countries without any industry economy against a China or US would have laser weapons, nukes, and huge economy. I don't know what this means. Think about it. Countries without any industry economy against a China or USA who have laser weapons, nukes, and huge economy. I don't know what that means. That just sounds like a bunch of things smashed together. Read the previous comment. Oh, you're referring to Nelson Moreno. I thought you were talking to me. You guys can talk amongst yourselves. Yo, you guys can have a chat. I'm not going to get in that. This is why I say don't call me bro. Call me Simon. That way I know you're talking to me. All right. Nigeria was a sovereign state with a GDP of more than $47 billion. PNID had put its Honda Civic up for sale. The company was essentially a financial abstraction, a piece of paper that might or might not be worth a fortune. The award was now $11 billion with interest. Oh my God. It all depended on the outcome of the trial. The solution to the money problems came from a lawyer named Seamus Is it Seamus or Seamus? Seamus. I'm gonna call him Seamus. Seamus Andrew, who had represented PNID in arbitration. Andrew worked in litigation finance. He took on cases with a high possible reward, then found investors to fund the court battle. After PNID won the arbitration, Andrew foresaw a costly legal challenge, so he made a deal with VR Capital, a London based hedge fund that focused on exactly these sorts of specialized situations. In 2017, VR bought a 25% stake in PNID for $45 million. Mm, which allowed the company to pay for its own litigation in the civil trial. Think about that. Think about that. The two guys who own PNID just got $45 million for winning a case against Nigeria for $6.6 billion. And they're now able to live in luxury. They can buy Rolexes, fancy cars, smash on Slovakian hookers. They can do whatever they want to do with this money. This is insane. This is insane. The world of money and capitalism makes no sense. We are told since we're born, you need to work hard, buddy. You need to grind in, grind out every single day. Wake up early, do your job extra hard. Meanwhile, you can make millions of dollars by owning a piece of paper, going to court and getting a judgment. Absolutely crazy. All right. Nelson Moreno gave a comment. At the least, they bought the dinner before they Nelson Moreno talking real spicy. He talking real spicy today. I like it. I like your comments today, Nelson Moreno. Yeah, exactly, man. They put the Vaseline on before they slid it in and then took everything and ran. All right. Uh All right, I'm going to start over this article, this paragraph. I mean, in 2017, VR bought a 25% stake in PNID for $45 million, which allowed the company to pay for its own litigation in the civil trial. If the trial went their way, VR and Cahill would be entitled on paper to more than $1 billion each. Andrew's share on paper would run into hundreds of millions. Quinn died of cancer before the trial could start. Thank God. Thank God. God. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. I don't wish death on anybody. But if there's anybody that does deserve death, it's an old white man who's trying to get billions of dollars for doing nothing. He knows he did nothing from a country that's poor as Nigeria. Yeah, you deserve to die. And I hope that he's roasting right now. Quinn died of cancer before the trial could start and made an informal arrangement with his nephew, a lawyer named Trevor Burke, giving him a portion of his hypothetical share of the award. Taiga, who had been promised a small percentage of the future verdict, would get up to $500,000. The trial opened on January 23rd. The trial opened in January 2023. Mark Howard, a partner at Brickcourt Chambers and the lead lawyer for Nigeria, told a story about a dishonest and venal kebab who used repeated lies to pursue riches beyond the dreams of avarice. In Howard's telling, Quinn and Cahill were scam artists who totally lacked the ability to construct a $500 million gas facility, but pretended otherwise in order to deceive the government of Nigeria. Then, when Nigeria backed out of the unfavorable deal, they tried to shake it down in arbitration. One question that had puzzled Hoffman, the judge who oversaw the arbitration, was why Nigeria's lawyers had mounted such an inadequate defense. Howard said the answer was a devious plot. During the arbitration, PNID had somehow received copies of confidential legal documents from the Nigerian side, obtained, Howard argued, with more bribes. Banking records showed that PNID sent thousands of dollars to members of Nigeria's legal team in the midst of the arbitration process. Howard argued that the reason PNID wanted these documents was to keep tabs on whether Nigeria had learned about the smoking gun evidence that might have saved them from the arbitration award, the payments to Taiga. This is insane. This is insane. I've said this before, and a lot of Africans got on my ass. Pause. A lot of Africans were really mad at me because I went to Tanzania and Kenya and I made my Blacksit videos where I talked about the corruption in Africa and how it is unacceptable. It is unacceptable for you to go shopping for bread, milk, cigarettes, whatever, and you have to pay double the price. And they say, this is okay. This is how it's done in Tanzania. This is how it's done in our country. And we don't do this just to Americans. We do this to everybody. This is what the Africans say. The Africans think it's okay to rob other black people and to be corrupt and lying and stealing and thieving and conniving. It is not cool. It is not okay. It's a moral issue. I know I talk a lot about fighting white supremacy, but also we as black people, all people need to be moral. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't just rob people of their money, and don't be so quick to sell out your people for a few shiny trinkets. When the slave masters came to get us out of Africa, a lot of people think that they came with their guns, they came with weapons, they came with swords, they came with tanks and cannons and all sorts of stuff. They really just came with money. They were buying our people and they sold us for trinkets. Trinkets, these little things called manillas that are worthless today, little circular, hook things made out of metal. And the Africans thought that they were valuable. The Europeans just told them that the manillas were valuable. And so the Africans sold us literally for trinkets, for nothing, for nothing. And this is insane. This is unacceptable. This level of corruption is acceptable when even Nigeria's lawyers are possibly corrupt. The lawyers representing Nigeria at the arbitration court were possibly corrupt. That's insane. That is insane. All right. Once again, I'm not bashing on Nigeria, but I am not holding back. This needs to be discussed. We need to put this out in the open. The corruption that is in Africa really needs to be dismantled. And that starts from within. The white folks ain't making us do this. Yes, they destroyed us as a people, brainwashed us to worship them as gods and that sort of stuff, divided up our continent. Our continent, here I go slipping up, divided up the African continent and created these arbitrary borders. But the corruption part has to be dealt with from within. Seriously. All right. Howard then questioned PNID's associates about all the cash payments recorded in the ledger books under euphemisms like Dublin expenses and PR. If the money hadn't paid bribes, what was it for? Cahill and colleagues described them variously in internal documents and in court as carry around money, brown envelopes, round sums, fuel for high value transactions where confidentiality is required, money to be used in case they were stopped by an armed robber, doodles, brown paper bag money. In the witness box, Cahill denied that PNID had paid bribes in Nigeria or during the arbitration. He could not be reached for comment. Testifying by video link from Nigeria, Taiga said that the money from Quinn was for medical expenses, quote unquote, not favors. By the time Howard got around to the engineering drawings that his opponent seemed to have copied from another project, it was hard to imagine how they could ever emerge from the deep crater he had placed them in. When it was PNID's turn, its lawyers made a smart, steely case. David Wolfson, a lawyer with the commercial law firm One Essex Court, told a story in which the villain was the Nigerian bureaucracy. Nigeria had put up a weak defense at arbitration, so it lost. It should have known how important the case was, but it didn't snap into action. Too bad, that's life. Then, faced with admitting to the public how ineffectual it had been, it decided not to pay its bills and instead dispatched the EFCC and the National Police to clean up after it, inventing a pattern of fraud from a list of humdrum bank withdrawals. PNID's lawyers argue that the case was not about bribery. It was about the sadly familiar Nigerian phenomenon of institutional incompetence, calling them basically in legalese dumb Africans, dumb black folks. You dummies, you just want to make up something after you failed to come to court. You know, they're making Nigeria seem like that guy that skips out on bail. He jumped bond. He jumped bond. Nigeria jumped bond. That's what they're trying to say. But that's not cool because the inherent flaw in this case, the inherent flaw in PNID's defense is the idea that these two guys who did not do this business at all, who literally just had a piece of paper saying they had a company in the British Virgin Islands, were ever seriously intending to open this gas and oil extraction company in Nigeria. That was the major fault of this case. This whole case is built on a fraud, essentially, because these guys had no intentions and no capability of doing it. If these guys deserve $6.6 billion from Nigeria from a piece of paper saying that they were going to open this gas power plant, then I deserve $20 billion from the government of Hungary for me saying that I'm going to open the world's largest cheese factory. I deserve that. I deserve the world's largest cheese factory contract for $20 billion just because I got a piece of paper that says it and somebody shook my hand. This is the inherent flaw. But they're really taking this seriously because, once again, if the roles were reversed and these were two black men who thought that they were going to, fleece France out of $6.6 billion, they would get laughed out of court. This would not be an arbitration. They would not take their cases seriously. Nothing like that. In an alternate universe, two white guys are coming to the International Court of Justice in Accra, in Ghana, trying to get justice from an all-black jury. Think about that. We live so commonly in this world where we think that this is natural, that it's actually unnatural. But y'all ain't ready for that though. Y'all ain't ready for that though. Anyway, the judge, Robin Knowles, disagreed, and in October, he ruled in favor of Nigeria, overturning the award and leaving PNID with nothing. Yes, there is victory. There is a God. There is a God. All right, leaving PNID with nothing. The case demonstrated what some individuals will do for money, he wrote, giving no thought to what their enrichment would mean in terms of harm for others. He referred Andrew for a disciplinary hearing with the Bar Standards Board for his indefensible handling of Nigeria's internal documents, but he also criticized the vehicle, the arbitration system itself, as an open process allows the chance for the public and the press to call out what is not right, he wrote, but arbitration happens in private. Andrew told me that the verdict was unfair to him and says he is seeking an appeal. I believe that I acted in accordance with my professional duties, he wrote in an email, which included a strict duty of confidentiality to my client. PNID's lawyers wrote that they were disappointed with the outcome, but the Nigerian press saw it as a wake-up call about the need to checkmate the reckless expenditure of public funds to make sure that the government actually knew whom it was doing business with. In an editorial, The Guardian, a Nigerian daily newspaper, urged the country to look beyond the euphoria of Knowles' ruling and implement reforms to prevent the same thing happening again. All right. Final paragraph, I believe, right here. Knowles' decision rankled many prominent members of the arbitration profession who saw it as gratuitously chastising an otherwise well meaning group. These abuses happen with extraordinary infrequency, Gary Bourne told me. He was right. But the abuses that do happen can have outsized consequences when countries wind up staring down the barrel. Bryant Garth, a law professor who wrote the standard history book on arbitration, told me that the PNID process showed the danger of the arbitration systems being manipulated by a greedy actor. If it treats the state as if it's just another business, he said, rather than the representative of the people. Yes, the people aren't involved in these multi-billion-dollar deals. The average Nigerian will not see a penny, even if this deal happened, of the fruits of this project happening and the billions of dollars that it would have generated for the people. Businesses and countries are two different things, which is why it pisses me off so much when people say we need our countries to be ran like businesses. We need to elect a businessman to run our country. A country is meant to create general welfare for all people, whether they be disabled, whether they be abled, whether they be men or women. A company is meant to make money. A company is meant to make profit. A company is meant to exist for as long as its usefulness is. Countries are not like that. Countries are not like that at all. A country is meant to promote the welfare of people, not just to make a few people rich, which is the inherent difference between a country and a business. All right. For months, while I was reporting this article, I tried to track down Grace Taiga, but after employing all the usual channels, I came up empty. Eventually, I hired a Nigerian journalist and fixer to help me. He found that since her initial arrest in 2019, Taiga had been in and out of prison. At one point, she skipped out on bail and was rearrested. The reason seemed to be that her kidneys were failing and she was undergoing dialysis. This meant that at least that part of her testimony, the medical trouble, was true. Maybe that was one reason she needed the money from Quinn and Cahill. Then in early September, the fixer called me to say that he had learned from a source inside the EFCC that Taiga was dead. According to the source, the cause was cancer, but there weren't any other details. The Ministry of Petroleum Resources had no information. Death registration is not common in Nigeria, the fixer wrote. I wondered whether her 2 years in prison had worsened her health problems. Her daughter, who was also implicated in the scheme, could not be reached for comment. The fact that the small-time local bureaucrat and not the investors or the lawyers had suffered the most severely spoke to the real-life consequences of financial fraud, which often seems so abstract and opaque. I went back to the court records to reread Taiga's text. I found the familiar flagrant corruption. But in light of her death, I also saw a side that seemed painfully trusting. In 2014, she texted Cahill excitedly, dreaming of the windfall that would never come. I keep remembering Papa telling me, Grace, you will be so wealthy, she wrote, using her nickname for Quinn. You will travel all over D world. Taiga made the smallest gain and paid the highest price. You know what? Even though Taiga sold out her people, even though Taiga, did corruption in a very, malevolent way, blamefully stupid way, I'm not going to fault her. I'm not going to just hate on this black woman for, falling easily prey. I mean, if you write a text with all over D world, I question your intelligence. She might not have been the brightest candle in the room. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to falter. A lot of Africans are very poor. A lot of Africans are very poor. If you ever meet some Nigerians who really come from Nigeria, they'll really tell you about their country and how, messed up it is and that sort of stuff. And, I don't fault anybody for wanting to get ahead in life. But I do think that some sacrifices will have to be made. You get what I'm saying? There is no amount of money that you can pay me to not say that white supremacy is the devil. There is no amount of money that you cannot pay me to say that anti-black racism is the one of the biggest problems on the planet. There is no amount of money that you could pay me to sell out my people. There's no amount of money that you could pay me to not be true to myself. I'm always going to keep it real, and I'm always going to say what I'm going to say. And I know I know a lot of people say there's no amount of money for me to do this or that. There's no amount of money for me to suck a dick or whatever. But I know this is true because this channel could be way bigger if I decided to be like other black content creators. If I decided to be a passport bro and take my phone out and pull it out in front of a bunch of random big titty white women and tell you about all the sexual experiences I've had all over the world, this channel would be Austin Holloman. I'd be one of the biggest passport bros if I really wanted to. But I don't, because I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. This channel could be hella big if I decided to be an FBA, anti-African poster where all I did was bash on Africans, or all I did was talk about FBA this or FBA that and that sort of stuff. I don't want to do that. I want to be me. I want to be myself. And I want the people that tune into me to actually like what I have to say. I will always speak out about the things that I find important, and that the audience that I cultivate here finds important, and that we're all motivated on speaking our truth and living in truth and understanding and learning in truth. But we have to, as black people, and if we're also going to be talking about Africa, have to get rid of the corruption, have to not be so willing to just take the biggest amount of money just because we come from squalor and poverty to do things that will be in the negative interest of our people. We have to think larger, we have to think broader, and that sort of stuff. All right, I'm going to continue here. The remaining players have not stopped trying to recover their losses. The hedge fund that bankrolled PNID's defense in London, VR Capital, stood to make a profit if the verdict had gone its way. After the bribery allegations came out, the fund took action to hedge its investment. It filed an arbitration case against Brendan Cahill and Lismore Capital, Seamus Andrews litigation funding company. According to VR, Cahill and Andrew took its $45 million but misled them about how PNID had won the contract to begin with. Now that the trial is over, VR can go after Cahill's personal assets and whatever is in the coffers of Lismore Capital. VR has not disclosed the amount it is seeking, and the hearings will not be open to the public, but the court filings tell us the venue, an arbitration center in London. That's poetic justice right there. Shout out to Jesse Barron for writing this article. Very, very dope story. Very interesting. Highlights a lot of issues in our world when it talks to how wealth and capital is accumulated and controlled, and how it continues to be used as a cudgel over black life and black countries. I've said this before and I've said it again. The only thing black people really own in this world are these nations, these colonial constructs, and we barely own them at that. The best thing we can do as black people in one of the realms of fighting white supremacy is make sure that the majority black nations of the Caribbean and in Africa maintain their sovereignty economically and politically, and that they're not full of corrupt leaders as well. And yeah, I really thought this article was interesting. I hope you did too. Shout out to Nelson Moreno for jumping into the chat. Shout out to C Doggo for jumping in the chat. Shout out to Craig Mack for jumping in the chat. Shout out for Mad Villainy jumping into the chat. Shout out to JS Ventress jumping into the chat. I would love to chop it up with y'all on X, on Twitter. Y'all can come in anytime I host a space. Y'all are more than welcome on these live streams. Leave comments, leave suggestions, leave new articles that you want me to read. I'll try to be more consistent, coming on at least an hour a day to release some content and talk to the people. Shout out to all the new subscribers. I'm about to hit about 2,700. Very small channel, but I'm very proud of it. And movie reviews. Also send your movie suggestions and subscribe to Backpack Bandits as well. Replay this on the playback, always on 2X. It sounds much better on 2X. Peace. Oh, check out DJ Quick Culturalist Theory. Go watch my episode on Culturalist Theory. Please, please go support, leave comments, say Simon Hill sent me here. Go check it out. Go check it out. All right, peace.